sugar fasting, if people haven't heard about it, it is the 6 of the following foods in any sort of mix and match way that you want to mix them together. But you have fruit juice, honey, maple syrup, sugar, and not to be eaten too much, candy. The candy is kind of just the fun part. When you go to a movie or something like that, you can throw down some candy. If you want a little candy pre or intra workout, I don't see any problem with that. But when I say a little candy, I'm talking about maybe a handful, maybe 2 handfuls, depending on the size of your hand. Jon Heck, you got big old mitt over there, right? But yeah, those are the foods, and then you just try to run that for basically as many days as you can handle. And a lot of people have a lot of conjecture against that, and they should. There's no fat. There's hardly any protein coming in. There's they're very probably small trace amounts of fat coming in from something because every food has like, little tiny amounts of stuff in it. And there's definitely protein in fruit. Some people may not realize that, but if you're having, 2,000 or 3,000 calories, probably maybe about 8 or 10% of that, which is not a lot. Probably 8 or 10% of that is probably protein. So it's not like it's completely zero protein, but you might only be getting like 30 or 40 grams, which for a bodybuilder type of guy or some people out there, then this might be their first time hearing that. And if they never heard that before, I mean, I believe, especially if I was 25, I believe I would be typing some bullshit on somebody else's thing, being like, 25 grams of protein, you need 250 grams, I believe I would probably be upset with it too. And I think that's a very natural reaction.
Yeah, when I first heard about this, I'll be honest, my initial instinct was like, whoa, I don't know about this, but I held off. I was like, listen, I'm gonna sit back here. Let me watch this thing play out. Let me watch some of the information come out, because I'm not gonna put some opinion out there on this when A, I've never tried it myself, and B, I just don't know enough to have any sort of stance on this. And I think a lot of people probably immediately reflexively we're chiming in, oh, this is a terrible approach, no protein, yada yada. So I held off. And I've been seeing a lot of interesting information coming out, hearing about this FGF21 hormone for the first time, which I'll be honest, I'm not going to be able to bring a whole lot of new biological or scientific insight to this diet. I am very, very much still learning about this as I go, as I'm sure, in a way you still are, in a way that a lot of people who are proponents of this diet are still learning. But, I wasn't really aware that there was this metabolic phenomenon whereby highly restricting protein, you can drive this FGF21, which is this big metabolic booster. And it seems like, okay, maybe there are some protein sparing effects from increased levels of this FGF21. And there's compelling research to show that it is a big player when it comes to weight loss. So, when I first saw you putting this out, I was like, okay, super low fat, leveraging carbs. I like it. And I was taken aback by the protein thing. But the more I'm hearing, the more I'm like, okay, this is something I just am uneducated on. And I'm really excited to learn more about this. Just before I want to get a little,
I want to interrupt for just a second and say, it's interesting because I think it goes well with the cycling that you've been doing.
yeah.
And I don't know if you've done a lot in terms of cycling the protein, but now you have an opportunity by, hearing some of this new information as you do more research and maybe some experimentation on yourself or with maybe a couple clients that are kind of willing to give it a go. Maybe now you can kind of free up the protein a little bit, because it's very liberating to not be tethered to protein the way that we have been for so long. And some of the stuff I'm doing is fairly extreme because it's new, and I am learning. I'm learning as I go. Last night I actually just broke my sugar fast because I was like, I just feel like having some rice and lean meat, and I had 93.7 lean ground beef, a burger that was, probably like maybe a half pound or something like that. And I had a big old pile of rice and dumped some salt on there. It was freaking amazing. It tasted so good. And it was just what I needed. So now intuitively I'm starting to kind of learn what I need. But people don't have to follow this so strictly, that the exact way that some of the suggestions I have. My suggestions are, I'm trying to go top down. So I'm trying to go like, hey, this is the best way for you to have sort of, quote unquote, guaranteed weight loss. If you go fruit and fruit juice and you do that for a handful of days, that'd be a really good experiment for people to do just to see how they feel. They might not love that. And then from there, you can start to figure out, okay, how many sugar fasts should I do in a row? Or should I even mess with full days of sugar fasting? Or should I just do sugar fast by day and like meat and starch by night? And you start to fall on something that's probably gonna fit you and fit what you're able to handle. But back to yourself, I think now it might give you an opportunity to tell a certain athlete or certain person like, hey, let's go 210 on the protein for today. But tomorrow, when we reduce, like tomorrow, because we're going to be reducing the fats, let's also reduce the protein, because those two things come together so often. So when you are no longer when you no longer have to get in 300 grams of protein or 250 grams of protein, it's so much easier to keep their fats down.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And also protein, in my opinion, it's the hardest thing to eat, right? For a guy like my size, I'm over 300 pounds and I've been for most of my career eating 300 grams plus protein daily. I mean, just having to eat that much meat on a daily basis, it's hard. It's chewing through chicken breast. Like you said, it's hard to eat a lot of meat while keeping your fat low. So you're limited pretty much to, chicken breast and white fish and bland sources of protein that over time, man, it sucks to eat them. That's why I started doing the chicken shake a lot, because it's so damn hard to eat that much protein. But I mean, I'll be honest, I've really never played with cycling protein. That's always been sort of the one macronutrient that I kind of put in this box of, okay, this is kind of the variable that I just keep consistent. Maybe I'll increase it a bit in a diet, decrease it in a bit in a surplus. And yeah, there's some wiggle room. Do you need a gram per pound of body weight, a gram per pound of lean body weight? You could probably get away with eating less than we think, but it was always kind of a variable that became a little disinteresting to me. And I was always looking more at the carbs and the fats, and very much started to develop the mindset of, okay, keep the protein high. But then when it comes to proteins or fats, you kind of got to choose one or the other. You can't have them both high. Right. That's where the disaster kind of strikes. Let me ask you this, when it comes to doing sugar fasting for multiple days and then breaking the fast, do you feel any negative effects trying to get back into sugar fasting? Like for keto, it takes a while to get into ketosis, right? And then you break yourself out of ketosis. It might feel crappy trying to get back into it, those first few days becoming keto adapted. Do you experience that with the sugar fasting?
Not at all. In fact, really all that happens when you break the sugar fast, you just feel awesome, because now you get the opportunity to eat something slightly different. Like, you just get very tired of eating something sweet. That's why I very much recommend, I think it would be great for a lot of your listeners, a lot of people following along. I would say just try to commit to a full week. Just try to commit to a full week. Now go low and slow, because you have no idea of your uh, tolerance for sugar and fructose and honey and all this stuff. And don't just start eating bags of candy. You're gonna automatically feel like shit probably. Yeah, so go low and slow. Maybe start out with maybe 70 grams of carbohydrate per each time that you want to eat, and just see how you feel afterwards and so on. But yeah, when you break it, first of all, you feel great, and then going back into it's not hard. The interesting thing is that for myself and for many other people I've been communicating with, I've got a friend named Jeff Powers that I've been communicating with about all kinds of stuff over the years. He's been a fan, but also became a friend. And he's in his 60s. He doesn't look like a pro bodybuilder or anything like that. He's more of a normal dude, trains hard, former police officer, and he's a great guy to kind of run these experiments with. But as he's doing the diet, he's just finding that his cravings are changing. And that's what I found too. So my craving last night was to eat rice. My craving last night was to eat lean meat. What a beautiful craving to have, right? Like, that's awesome, because I think your body is kind of in recognition of hey man, you haven't had this in a while. And I always like meat, but I was eating like a lot of meat every day, a few pounds of meat every single day for I don't even know how long, 20 years or something like that. And even like some snacks and stuff that we have around the house, I'm not interested in them. And so last night I was so excited to eat this lean ground beef patty with some rice and some salt. And then after that, I was just threw down a steak shake. I'm like, this is like the perfect, it was like blissful. And then as you're mentioning, sometimes with keto, it's kind of hard to get back on the keto train. It's also sometimes you have like a carb hangover. You ate a lot of carbs and the next day you're kind of still craving those carbs and stuff. So I personally found for myself, and other people might be finding something different, but even with people I'm helping, that their taste buds seem to change on this. You get very sweet adverse as you start to do it for longer. That sweetness is almost sitting on your tongue all day, and you just kind of want something different. And then finally, you have the opportunity to have something different, but the something different that you want is something savory or something starchy. And it's not necessarily just craving pizza all week.
That's an interesting point, right? Because when you're in keto and you're completely restricting your carbs, that's where your cravings tend to go. You want the sweet food, and that's completely in clash with trying to be in ketosis. Whereas, to your point, you're eating a bunch of sweet things, your cravings shift to more wholesome options, right? When you're craving something salty, something more savory, you can satisfy that craving with, like you said, meat or a starchy carbohydrate. So that's an interesting point. Now, for how much weight have you lost now? What have your results been thus far?
When I get down to 200 pound mark, it'll be probably officially around 25 pounds. But this morning I was 209. And so I'm still working my way down. Last week I got down to 203, but that was like after a workout. I was dehydrated a bit. It's starting to get a little warmer out here in Sacramento. Um, so, the scale can pop around quite a bit. I think for people that are heavier, the scale can even move around even more. But for people that are, like myself, people that are leaner and have pretty good amount of muscle tissue, you might see the scale really have some wild swings here and there, because you could be more full of glycogen on one day versus another. And it is, kind of an interesting thing. It's like if you eat very similar on a day, then you're going to have similar scale results. But if you're eating pattern and, when you eat and so forth, it changes, well, then the scale is going to change quite a bit as you go. So basically, right now I basically have lost, about 15 pounds, and my net overall weight is down quite a bit. I have a question for you. Why do you think a lot of times, I guess maybe even outside of bodybuilding, I mean, most of the time when we talk about carbs and we're talking about performance, we are so often not really talking a lot about fruit. We're not really talking much about fruit juice. I know, some people are like, oh, I get a Gatorade and then I throw like some dextrose in there. And I know there's these like, highly cyclic dextrins that people are fans of and so forth. But my understanding is that basically all that stuff is a starch. And maybe it's because people want that response, and you don't get the same insulin response from fructose, because my understanding is fructose, kind of goes right into the liver. So what are some of your theories on because bodybuilders don't do fruit. People might not know that, but a bodybuilder that's getting ready for the stage, some of the top coaches, Hani Rambod, who I had the pleasure of working with, I asked him about fruit. He was like, nope. So we didn't have any fruit. So why do you think in performance and in bodybuilding, you don't see that much fruit or fruit juice?
I think it's a mistake. I'm in favor of fruit by far. If you work with me as a nutrition client, you will always find fruit, at least pre and post workout. I think there's sort of this old school stigma against fructose, sort of this old school belief that fructose is, better chance of being stored as body fat, not as good of a fuel source. And I disagree with that. And I think fruit has a number of benefits just outside of purely being an energy source. Number one, they're going to be loaded with potassium and other micronutrients, which is one reason I really like to put them around training. So like pre-workout, right now I'm either doing banana or pineapple. Intra workout, I'm doing coconut water. And then post workout, if I had banana pre, I'm doing pineapple post. If I had pineapple pre, I'm doing banana post. And a big part of
What's some of your reasoning for that? Because I know that you always have like a reason. Coconut water's got the potassium. The pineapple has some of the enzymes to help with protein. Or um, you're always you're always thinking of these little nuanced things. So I'm imagining that's part of it, huh?
Yeah, and so the potassium, that's a big part of it. Pre and post workout, intra workout, the coconut water. The fruit, just some of the other micronutrients as well. And I see the training window. I've always looked at it as a great opportunity to get more of the simple sugars in. And I've always gone with kind of a blend of more complex carbs and sugary carbs pre and post workout. So like pre right now, I'm doing a combination of rice and then fruit. Intra, it's the coconut water with some highly branched cyclic dextrin, aminos, and creatine and salt. And then post workout, it's cream of rice, just another rice-based product, also with fruit. So again, I'm getting kind of that blend of the a little bit of a slower digesting carb from a rice source, mixed with a simple sugar in the fruit. So I like getting a little bit of a surge in that simple sugar as I'm about to enter the gym. I like having fast acting sugary carbs while I'm training, just quickly replenishing blood glucose and replenishing liver glycogen, which the fruit is going to do that. So, and then also in weight gain phases, I push fruit pretty damn hard as a carbohydrate source. Now, one of the things that I guess I've tend to find for myself in dieting, using things like oatmeal is a little more satiating of a carb source. So I'll go for higher volume carb sources, potatoes, oatmeal, things like that. But when I'm gaining weight, I use a lot of fruit and fruit juice. Those little naked smoothies. There's like 75 grams of carbs in one little bottle. So I use those quite a bit. And there's just going to be a hydrating effect from fruit. So I'm very much not in the old school camp of steering away from fruit. Whether you're dieting or whether you're gaining, I'm all for it.
Couple things I want to share with you that you might find interesting is that, and I think that was really well said, by the way, too, about, I think sometimes I think the bodybuilder crowd or some people might think like, oh, it just goes to your liver. So like, why do we care about it? Let's just have starches because starches require more insulin. And then that insulin takes the glucose. This is my understanding, which is not always amazing, but takes the glucose into the muscles. And so that's probably why the bodybuilders are a little bit more after those starches. But something I want to share with you is that you don't have to be, super low protein on this diet. You can actually have collagen and you can actually have leucine. What breaks up the party, I believe, of the the little FGF21 party that we're potentially after, is broken up by isoleucine. And so if you were to eat like, a lot of beef or just basically a lot of protein from any animal source, you would start to break that. But if you were very, very much concerned about muscle mass, there's two main things that you would do. You would introduce some maybe potentially post workout or anytime after a workout, you would introduce some collagen and some leucine. In addition to, you can also use a little bit of MCT oil. MCT oil is supposedly a driver. Well, again, a lot of this is like new. There's not that much research on it. MCT oil is supposed to be a little bit of a driver of some of that FGF21. And there's also another hormone playing around in the background for the nerds that want to like look it up. There's something called GDF15. And I guess when the GDF15 starts to hit is kind of when you should probably break your sugar fast. And then somebody will, well, how the hell will I know that? A lot of times you just become completely disinterested in food, which is the reason why I recommend and suggest people just try it for 1 week, because on day 3 or 4, you're just going to be like, man, you won't care much about candy. You won't care much about smoothies, like any combination of the foods. You're just going to be like, I just don't even give a shit anymore. And I think that that's usually a good sign of when to break it. So the two main things you would do if you're really trying to hold on to muscle mass would be, you would introduce some of those things I mentioned, the collagen, the leucine, and then you would also just break the sugar fast more often. And maybe you would do what I mentioned in sort of at the beginning of the show was, sugar fast by day, lean meat and starch by night. That would be something that even someone like yourself, you can just, after this show, sometime next week, you can just pick a day and be like, I'm going to try that Smelly bullshit protocols and sort of see what happens, just to get like just to get a little bit of experience with it.
Yeah, and then I'm sure just another factor that will help with muscle retention, training, right? I mean, what is going to be more of a powerful stimulus for muscle retention than training? And when you're leveraging a carbohydrate-based diet like this, in my opinion, this gives you a much better chance to push harder into your training than something like a keto diet, right? So as long as you're attacking the gym and maybe have you found that this diet allows you to keep volume high? Have you found that a lot of times when I'm working someone in a calorie deficit, they're losing weight, I might have them shift to a little bit of a lower volume approach, keeping intensity high. Hey, let's keep you really strong. That way we retain all of our muscle tissue. But in this case, I know you're reporting great energy and you're feeling great in training. Have you been able to keep a high work capacity and higher volumes in training?
Yeah, I feel like a crackhead. I mean, I really do. I'm like bouncing off the walls. I want to train multiple times every single day. I think the last 2 days is the first in a long streak of double day workouts. Those were the first 2 days that I didn't train more than once. So yeah, I've been really enjoying the extra energy from it. And I think kind of what's happened is because the workouts are so much more productive, there's no like lag. It used to be like a little bit for a warm up, and then I would get into the sets. And I know that like you need to, push up against some failure. And I know all the different things about hypertrophy training and strength training and stuff. So I know enough to like there has to be a part of the workout where you really hit it really well. And for me, that period has been shorter over the last couple of years because I don't enjoy the soreness. I don't enjoy the stiffness. Like I'm trying to let my body recover. I gotten into other things. I got into running and so forth. And so I've really calmed a lot of that down a bunch. But now I can just snap into the workout so much faster. And the workouts have become a little bit shorter. So rather than the workout being like 90 minutes and only having 30 minutes of good productivity, now the workout is 40 minutes and I have like 35 minutes of good productivity. So the whole workout, I'll be drenched in sweat. I'll be literally like dripping sweat. I feel awesome. I even I feel stronger to some degree, but obviously I'm not stronger than some of those, weights I hit years and years ago, but I am stronger on things like pull-ups. Obviously I could do, body weight exercises just way easier and even feeling like more athletic. And then the hydration. The hydration side of it is so big. I don't know how well hydrated you can be on a keto diet. It's very
You,
difficult. It's very difficult. And like the only thing I could think of on a keto diet, which is what I wrote in the book, The War on Carbs, I had some like exit strategies out of the ketogenic diet as somebody got leaner and got in better shape. And really it was just to add in some carbohydrate. And I talked in the book about having a little bit of fruit and yeah, just bringing your carbohydrates up a little bit because I got myself to a point where I could still have 100 and sometimes even up to around 200 grams of carbohydrate on a ketogenic diet, but that was very hard to manage because you were consuming so much fat. And so this, I know this seems like such a 180 for everybody, like that I did this like giant 180, but as you know, John, like this has kind of been playing in the background for like a long time, having guests like yourself come on the show. And I know that you've experimented. I mean, you read the book, The War on Carbs. I think you enjoyed some success on a ketogenic diet. So it's not like I'm not definitely not saying those diets don't work. I'm not saying that everyone should abandon those diets. In fact, if you're having good success on any of those diets, I don't think there's really much reason other than for experimental purposes to try anything else. Like if you're doing well there's many different roads to the top, and whatever way that someone finds, I'm all for it.